So, good evening, brothers, and thank you very much for the invitation. And it is a great joy for me to be with you here from the headquarters of Karnataka Jesuit province. I'm in the ground floor of the provincial Korea here in Bangalore, and I'm very glad to be with you in this evening and to discuss with all of you the history of the Society of Jesus. This is the way we'll go through. I'll give a general introduction to the history of the Society of Jesus. The second one is then I will enumerate some of the things connected with the early fathers of the Society of Jesus, starting with Ignatius and others. And specifically, today's theme happens to be, we'll be looking into in our 4 sections about the history of the Society of Jesus. The Society of Jesus has almost 500 years of history, and Karnataka province has 142 years within that history of the Society of Jesus. And we're looking at today in a very specific way this book, The Passion and Glory, written by Father Ignacio Echaniz. And today we'll be dealing with volume first, the spring, dating from 1529 to 1581. It consists of the first fathers of the Society of Jesus, the first companions we could call, the first 10, and five more, the illuminaries who continued the legacy of this great father, the first companions of Ignatius. So first of all, we'll go straight into the theme because we have got a little time, and within this time we'll try to cover. At 7:15, I will stop my talk and we'll continue to deal with the questions that you have. By 7:30, we should be all over with this talk. So the first general introduction is this. What is the relevance of reading or studying the history of the Society of Jesus? What is the relevance? You must have heard the famous quotation of St. Jerome, the biblical scholar who came up in the 4th and 5th century. He said, ignorance of the scripture is the ignorance of Jesus. The ignorance of the scripture is ignorance of Jesus. In other words, if you put that in different modified version and apply it to a Society of Jesus, I would say this. The ignorance of the history of the Society of Jesus is the ignorance of your own vocation itself. Ignorance of the history of the Society of Jesus is the ignorance of your very vocation itself. Why? Because the Society of Jesus has a tremendous history, a glorious history, a history filled with the passion and glory. It has also the history with all sorts of consequences and troubles and death and destruction of society. And that's why it is fascinating. The relevance of the history of society is also fascinating for us. The second reason is because it came up in the 16th century at a very momentous time of the history of the church. We cannot read the history of the Society of Jesus away from the history of the world, away from the history of the church. In other words, the history of the Society of Jesus is part and parcel of the world history. It is part and parcel of the history of the church. So therefore, if you want to know the better theology, what has happened in the 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, and 20th century, that is century that passed away, and today we are 21st century, we just cannot neglect the history of the Society of Jesus. It is flesh and blood of the very history of the church. The second point is, it is relevant for us because the history of the Society of Jesus tells us much more about ourselves. If the Society of Jesus founded in 1540, September 27, by papal bull Militantes Ecclesiae, Regimini Militantes Ecclesiae, it is because it was an opportune time for God himself to establish the Society of Jesus. It ran through a tremendous kind of bullying, or what do you call against the wishes of many of the people who were in the high powers of the Catholic Church. And still, it was made possible because of the grace of God that was given to specifically St. Ignatius of Loyola. And all these first companions, 9 of them who were with Ignatius since the beginning of the Society of Jesus, were always inspired by his life, by his personal spirituality, by his charisma that he had. And first charisma was that it drew from the spiritual exercises. And these spiritual exercises were very important for all the companions. And that made a significant difference. Because starting with Ignatius goes to Paris to study, the first group of people, starting with his own roommates, Francis Xavier and Peter Faber, become so friendly with him, and they become part of the very first little nest they construct in the College of Santa Barbara, and that is the beginning of the history of the Society of Jesus. The third point is the history of the Society of Jesus, very much part of our life, because the Society of Jesus came up in a time when very difficult time in the church. The scandals, the nepotism, the things that was going on in the universal church, specifically the Italian church, the European church, really scandalous. The church, the Society of Jesus came up at a time when already Martin Luther in Germany revolted against the established church. Martin Luther was not a Protestant. He was an Augustinian monk. He was Augustinian Catholic monk. Because the church was so much demoralized situation, it had absolutely lost its ethical and moral sense to govern. Here comes Martin Luther with his thesis as a monk, who had studied the scriptures, who had studied the history of the church, who had studied the tradition, the fathers of the church. Therefore, during this time, the Society of Jesus comes. The fourth point I would like to say about this Society of Jesus comes up at a time where Ignacio was really inspired by something different. He imagined something impossible. That is what made him to think about a society. That's why, my dear brothers, since the beginning of the Society of Jesus, it has been different. It has been unique. It has been diverse. It has been completely, absolutely different from what we think about like any other congregations or orders. Society of Jesus is one of the last orders to be established, because the Council of Trent, which comes up in 1545, says no more orders. You must have heard about Benedict, Saint Benedict, who established a Benedictine order. After that, we have heard about Saint Dominic, established Dominican order. Then we have Francis of Assisi, who established Franciscan's order. Then we have got Carthusians. Then we have got Cistercians and all other different orders that have monastic orders came up. And all these were orders, but monastic orders. Society of Jesus was completely different from monastic orders. It is not a monastic order. Society of Jesus is not a monastic order. It is a clerical order, but it is not a monastic order. After this establishment of the Society of Jesus, 1540, all other establishments of religious institutes are called congregations. But ours is Society of Jesus is an order. And there is a lot of specificities that you have heard during the novitiate time and you have read about it. Don't want to deal with that because we'll come about that. So therefore, what are the possibilities available? What are the possibilities available to the study of the history of the Society of Jesus? Okay. Are you able to see my screen? No. How to share? I want to share with you my screen. Share screen. Okay. Yeah. I suppose you can see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So we can see this general introduction, relevance reading, and we studied about what are the possibilities available to study the history. We have got a lot of books available in our libraries, and also we study while studying the secular history and the society's, church's history. So there are possibilities. And today we'll be taking into straight away beginning to the question of in discussion, that is um, the Passion and Glory, Flesh and Blood, History of the Society of Jesus, Volume 1. And it is a very fascinating because the title itself is very different. It is unlike other books, either it is Broderick's or Bangert or John O'Malley's The First Jesuits. It is a different book because Ignacio, Father Ignacio, deals specifically on the characters of the first members of the Society of Jesus. And we'll start with the beginning of this series. So let's come straight away to the popes and generals. Who are the people covered specifically? You know, you can see that popes there, Paul III, who gives the permission to establish the Society of Jesus in 1540, and during the time Ignatius Loyola comes up. So Ignatius Loyola as general is therefore under three popes. Second is Julius III. You know, the constitutions were approved. The institute was second time was approved by Julius III, 1550. And third one is Marcellus. Marcellus lived not on 6 to 8 months. That's why it was short period. Then we have Paul IV, who will come across very much in this Passion and Glory, 1555 to 1559. And during this time, Diego Lainez was the general of the Society of Jesus. 1556, Father Ignatius died, and Diego Lainez comes up. And the Paul IV is also called as Cardinal Caraffa. You must have heard about. He is the founder, one of the co-founders of Theatine Order, and this Theatine Order, loses significance with his death. Then afterwards, Diego Lainez also worked with Pius IV. It's very important, Pius IV, and Pius V, Francis Borgia. You know the Francis Borgia, the Duke of Gandia. He becomes the general of the Society of Jesus. Under his reign as general, many things happen. And finally, we have Edward Mercurian under 1573 should be, not 1673, 1573 to 1580 under Gregory the 13th, Pope under whom it comes about. So we saw the context in which this book is written and luminaries, church in trouble, corruption, lack of personal holiness in the lives of clergy, Reformation, counter-reformation that I spoke about, the religious orders almost lost its significance. The fourth point also here, we should remember the development of academic centers in Europe, especially the universities. You must have heard about Sorbonne University. Ignatius goes there. It was one of the third university. You know, for the first university in Europe was established in Bologna, in Italy, where Francis Xavier's father did his doctorate. Very interesting development. The second oldest university in Europe was Sorbonne University. Third one was Oxford. Fourth one is Heidelberg. That is in Germany. So fifth one is development of the idea of humanism. You must have studied about Desiderius Erasmus in the 15th century. A person of great intellect, a person who thought something different, who wanted to bring reform in the church, but he never left the church, unlike Martin Luther. Here is Desiderius Erasmus, who widely traveled, studied and promoted the humanism. What is humanism? Humanism, nothing but the humanistic ideas, the secular ideas about learning new languages. As we know, during the humanism, art and architecture developed. The Baroque culture comes up. The Church of Jesuit, Chiesa di Sant'Ignazio, Church and the Vatican, many of the churches in Europe were all of that nature, including, we can say to the great extent, our church in Mangalore, built by the Italian fathers, St. Aloysius College Chapel, is a Baroque style with mosaics and with his frescoes and paintings, a lot of space. It is heavenly glorification. All those are part of Baroque style. It is meant, Baroque style also says about, it is opening to the bigger, opening up to the higher, opening to the heavenly things. It means it is opening up your wider horizons. Humanism also gave rise to new ideas, intellectual, the linguistics, artistic, musical, a lot of things gets composed. It also led to new lands, discovery of new lands, new routes. Americas was found in 1492 by Columbus. 1498 comes Vasco da Gama to India. So these are the things have happened. That means there is a new enthusiasm in Europe. So these are the personalities we study today. Ignatius of Loyola, 1491 to 1556. His companion Peter Faber then, Francis Xavier, Diego Lainez, the second general, Alfonso Salmeron, the fifth companion, Nicolas Bobadilla, and his Simão Rodrigues. He was a Portuguese, or Simon Rodrigues. These six companions of Ignatius, the first six companions of Ignatius, were his own, influence, personal. I have put 8, 9, and 10. Claude J, Pascal Broet, Jean Cadour, all these are French guys. They came under the influence of Peter Faber when in 1535, Ignatius leaves Paris, Sorbonne, and goes back to his country in order to get better treatment to his health. Health was beginning to fade away. And finally, they meet in 1537 in Venice. So at that time, Peter Faber was made in charge of that group, keep the group together. Why? Because in 1534, August 15th, they had made a vow in Montmartre. They had taken the vow of poverty and chastity and also to go to Jerusalem. So they were supposed to go in 1537, meet in Venice, and from there go to Jerusalem. And during that time, Peter Faber, look at this Peter Faber, it's a very important personality. He's a person of great amicability, amicizia, they say in Italian, a friend of friendliness. And he brings together three guys, Claude J, Pascal Broet, and Jean Cadour. Jean Cadour is one of the youngest ones. And unfortunately, he's the first Jesuit to die. In 1542, he dies in Rome, a very young man. And you can see that during those times, we should say in August 1535, when those guys made vows, these were the age. It's very interesting to see. Facts and figures makes a much more interesting thing for us. Inigo was 43 years old. Peter Faber and Xavier were the difference of just 6 days of difference in their birth date, born in 1506, were just 28 years old. And can you imagine? Peter Faber was the leader of the group when in 1535 when Ignatius went to his hometown of Loyola and then Venice. Bobadilla was 25, Rodriguez was 24, Lainez was 22, Salmeron was 19. That means they were all of your age. Okay, I have crossed already the Inigo's age. Then other new arrivals that we see there are all French. They come in 1535 and 36. Claude J was 30 years old. They were already ordained priests. Pascal Broet was 35 and Jean Cadour was 28. So youngest of them all. But actually Salmeron gets ordained not in Venice, but he gets ordained later on because when he comes to Venice, still he's 23 years old. It was not permissible to get ordained at the age of 23. It was 24. So he gets ordained in, I think, 1542. So that is the story of these people. So what are the characteristics of these first companions? Inigo was a born leader. Peter Faber was affable, loving, gentle, you can say that. Xavier was very intelligent person, ardent, ready to zeal for Christ, you know, that is our person. Simon Rodriguez was a very sensitive person. You know, he had also a problem. He could not get along with Ignatius, Bobadilla, and Rodriguez. Bobadilla was, you know, he is a bit rough and tough character, but also a true person. You know, he said what came to his mind. You know, it's very interesting. Linus was of a Jewish origin, but of a very intelligent person, a man of great sharpness, intelligence. And Salmeron was youngest of them all, was very jovial. By all of them were, you know, what you call of one mind and soul. What is the learnings for us? Ignatius was a man of friendship. If you see the life of these guys in Paris, one thing comes to mind is Ignatius had the capacity to attract people. Absolutely, Ignatius was not an introvert at all. He was an extrovert. Whatever it happened, he shared with others. He had a capacity to attract people and get them, bring them together. What he did, he helped his friends through his finances. All the people had financial problems, and Ignatius was a very good collector of finances. He goes to Flanders, that means Belgium. Flemish people going Antwerp, that's one of their place he goes. That's a place he gets all the finances. He goes even to London, to get the money in 1530, something like that. He goes there and gets the finances. He helps even Francis Xavier. He helps those people came from Spain later on. Salmeron and Diego Lainez, they joined the group. They come to Paris in 1533 or something like that. So during the time, they did not have means of livelihood, and he helps them financially. That means Ignatius is a very generous person. He knew how to do the things. He took care of themselves. In the book, it says that many a time they fell sick, malaria and all sorts of things. And Ignatius was the one who was at their disposal. They slept in their rooms and took care of them because they were all friends in the Lord. They were not able to go to other places, and these are the people had a staunch, loving relationship with each other. And that is a learning for us as a scholastics, as priests of the Society of Jesus here in Karnataka or anywhere else, to be hold on to our brothers. When they came together, when they have to discuss something, that is very important. When there were disagreements, they said they sought time and they went afterwards, and that's what they did. And they knew how to enjoy their life as well. It's a very interesting description in this book. It says, in 1534, when they made vows in Montmartre, early morning they go to that place, and afterwards they come to the banks of the parish near Notre Dame, and they enjoy a picnic daylight. They had a dinner outside and all sorts of things, that made a difference. And also this book says in 1542 or 40 or 43, they make the final vows, St. Paul's, outside the walls. All were not there present, and they go there. They make their final vows. That means obedience to the Pope and all sorts of things established for the institute. And Ribadeneira, you must have heard about Ribadeneira. He was the youngest of them all. He was just 14 years old. At that time, he was 15 years old. He's the one who prepares the lunch, and they had a picnic-like day, something like that. And they said that Salmeron was one of the youngest ones who made that vow. He was so happy, James, and he was never so happy in his life like that, not like in Paris, but here, making the final vows, committing themselves, and enjoying the good company of those first companions. There were differences in their group, and they tried to sort them out with further meetings and other things. And they lived with the different temperaments in the group. They came from different countries. Spain, we should say always there was different rivalries between the first important figures, Francis Xavier and Ignatius, because Loyola family supported the King of Castilla, whereas Xavier's family supported the Xavierians, supported the French, the Savoyans, and they fought in Pamplona in 1521, and Ignatius breaking the leg. And there is a story in itself, an history of itself. And these are the different rivalries. They have to make peace among themselves. Then, if you say today, even in the Jesuits of Spain, they don't say that, where do they come from? Spain. They say that I come from Catalonia. Catalonia is Barcelona, the center of place. They say that I'm a Basque, they say. They say that I'm a Castilian. They don't like to say that Spanish language. Another meaning is no more what you call Spanish. I'm a Castilian. I speak Castilian language, they say. Because in Spain, there are different languages. There is language called Asturias. There's a language of Catalan language. There is a Spanish called Castilian language. So there are different languages and there are a lot of differences. There are guys from Portugal. Sometimes their kingdoms were in fight with each other. There are people from France. France fought with Germany, or Germany or France fought with the Spain. There are a lot of things that are going on as we know the history of the world. Um, so that is what makes the story of these first disciples interesting. This is just a picture of Francis Xavier's hand. You must have heard about the hand of Francis Xavier, which went unknowingly to Rome without anybody's notice. That is not the case. When they had to make him a saint, blessed, that hand has to be carried. And this hand is still uh, um, at the, what do you call, exposition in the Chiesa del Jesuit Church. I spent 3 years in that Collegio del Jesuit. And that hand is still for the public veneration. It is kept there. So there is a picture of it. Then we see this Ignatius and Francis Xavier. And here is Peter Canisius. So that is what I wanted to share about some of the pictures. And this is the Borgia. Okay. I would like to do something on what do you call, a little more descriptive study. The founding group. The founding group is very important, as I said. And since you have been reading these books, you know the history of the Society of Jesus better, I would like to give some glimpses that would give you a better understanding of these personalities. What is fascinating in the life of these, the first companions is that the great zeal to work for the church for Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was the center of their living. And therefore, what is the people call them? Not just simple clerics. They call them reformed priests. Reformed priests, people who were studied well, and they were also called Parisian masters. Means masters of Paris, because all of them had master's degrees in theology. Because at that time, theology was the subject, brothers. There wasn't masters in computer science. There wasn't a masters in anthropology. There wasn't a master in sociology or economics. Forget about it. Or not even in biology. The one subject that existed during that time was theology, subject of divinity. And they had to do the master's theology, a master's in theology. Even if you go to any of the universities, early universities, and that's why the Latin was so important to study. And all the sciences that we have, either it is zoology, your commerce, or a M.Com, or a B.Com, all these degrees came in recent years. Anthropology came just in the 60s or 70s, it came up starting from Oxford University. So this is the case. So we have to understand at that time, in the Christendom of Europe, what mattered was theology. What did it contain? It is studying of Latin, Greek, Hebrew. Then what did it contain? It contained studying of philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, etc. Because after St. Thomas of Aquinas, what are other things they studied? They studied science as well. Part of the theology was also studying science. That's why astronomy was considered a very important subject of study during those times. And that is why we have all around the places what do you call astronomical centers. That's why the Jesuits still run Vatican observatories. Even in Aloysius College, there was an observatory. Calcutta University, what do you call Xavier had an observatory. And Rome also. Even the Roman College, what is called the Gregorian University, has the observatory. That is the subject of studies. My dear brothers, we have got another 5 minutes. Actually, I had a little more to describe. Unfortunately, there's no much time. But anyway, you ask questions, we can continue with that, because I wanted to do a little more in detail because first our introduction took a little more time than expected. One thing that we can understand what happens to these people, the great experience that they have in Paris, studying together, helping each other, is a lesson for all of us. There was no competition among themselves. Among the first Jesuits, there was no competition. They knew their strength. Francis Xavier was brilliant in his studies. He gave the tuition to Ignatius. Peter Faber knew very well Greek language. That's why his tutor asked Peter Faber to give tuition to uh, Ignatius. Even though there was a huge age differences, everyone was ready. There was no late study as such. Everyone at their disposal. The third, another point that we can see in the first companions is, in spite of, once they came to know who the person of Ignatius is, through the spiritual exercises, the kind of experience Ignatius shared, they become very much united. That means, even in our life, it is not that our parties or picnics that keeps us together, our spiritual bond. Wherever we are, either we study in Dharwad or Mangalore or in Bangalore, wherever we are, it is our spirituality. That means we are here for a mission. That is very important. What happens during that journey from 1535 to 37? They experimented with everything. They were always at the disposal of the people. Not like monks. They did not sit and started to do the Coursera courses because there is COVID there. No, they were there giving relief to the people, preaching. There were plaguesmen, and they were at the disposal of people, helping in the hospital. And there is a very beautiful description about Francis Xavier helping out in Venice hospital. He seems to be having a person whom he has to take care. You know what they say in Kannada, kajji, you know, a lot of itching and other things. So, muses. So what happens? He found so difficult to sleep, it seems. So what he did, he went and he kissed it, kissed the, the person's, the itching part, so that he tried to get away from that. The more he disliked, he tried to do ajare contra, going against one's will, and did that. Another thing they did was teaching catechism to the children. Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, take the final vows with an intention of teaching catechism. Actually, hardly they teach. Only we are the ones who teach, because those are not taking final vows, or those scholastics. And that is the beauty of it. The last point I would like to deal with, I see the Francis is trying to communicate to me that time is over. I like to say is, what is interesting is there were differences. Bobadilla, if you like to read the life of story of Bobadilla, is very fascinating. All the time he was unhappy with the decisions, but with an intention, because he thought Ignatius had a little group which had veneration for him. Because he had given exercises, he becomes very close to them. Also Bobadilla. There was a personality cult in the beginning of the society. That's what he felt. And he said, that is not the right thing. That's why he was always saying that, no, that's not the thing. Another lesson that we can learn from is like a Simon Rodriguez, including the early Jesuits, like Ignatius' nephew that we come to know in that book, Antonio Arauzo. He becomes very close to the kings, the richness of those places. And suddenly they begin to lose their interest in the spiritual things. Their determination to see that Society of Jesus is one, we have to be followed. And Peter Canisius, one of the magnificent personalities in the early society, who wrote the Catechism of the Catholic Church in 2 versions, minor and major. We went on writing. He established 19 colleges in Bavaria, in Germany, Upper Germany, and Austria. 19 colleges. Each college stemming from 200 to 1,000 students. That means if you have got 1,000 students, all the colleges would have 19,000 students. It's like having a Jesuit college within few years. So we can imagine the work that they did, and they got the best people, people who had worth, people who came from very great families, and they worked for the society and building the church as a reformed priest. So with these few questions, with these some thoughts, I leave it here, and I'm very happy to answer your questions because we have got another 15 minutes, so you can ask questions and I can give elaborate much more.
Yeah. Thank you for the Olvin for the exposition. History can be taught in different ways, and it can be boring also. But you have made it very interesting. I'm sure I was looking at some of the faces there on the screen, attentively listening to you. So thank you for that beautiful, creative exposition of the history. Now, brothers, we have 10 to 15 minutes. You can ask questions, or you can also type in that chat box. So I will read out to Father Olvin. Either you can type or you can ask. You can raise your hand, or I can, if you raise your hand, I can see, because all of you are visible now. I think Inigo Sadhana has got some questions. Yes, Divij?
I have a question. Am I audible, Father?
Yes, you are visible also.
Father, we take final vows, especially the special vow when we take, we pronounce the vow that saying we'll teach catechism to children. But we see very few Jesuits, or literally no Jesuits teaching catechism to children, except for novices in their ministry in Sunday times. Except them, no one teaches catechism for children. We are going for higher level of theology, more of intellectual dimension of ministry is there. But what about the children's father? Then our vow will be just words of father.
So, Divij, thank you very much for that very curious question. And the answer is very simple. Theology is nothing but higher form of catechism. A little higher than catechism is theology. So, since this is the mode of teaching happens, because since the priests are a little more better educated, they teach the novices or others so that they can go and teach. That means we are doing a multiple effect, you know, multiple effect. But of course, we are supposed to teach, what Francis Xavier did was to teach catechism. And we do actually, I just gave a little bit to provoke you. I said this thing. I'm glad that you got the question. When we go and visit the families, when people come to us for counseling, what we do is we do teach theology, clarify things about their faith matters. What does it mean to you? This is the faith, questions relating to that morals or ethics. These questions are dealt in our personal colloquies, including the confession. Confession, we give a little bit of counseling in that time. Not counseling exactly, some sort of suggestions, some improvement. And these happen in those few minutes. And this is nothing but a catechism. Catechism, what is catechism? Catechismos, there's something to build upon your faith, your doctrine, so that you have the right way of dealing with those things.
Yes. Ashta Kiran? Agil has got only one question, Agil.
Father, you said about that Francis Xavier overcome his fear by doing Ajare Contra.
Not clear, not clear. Is it raining there in Mangalore?
Come closer to the computer or something like that.
Father, you said Francis Xavier overcame his fear by doing Ajare Contra. He went and kissed or touched his finger. So now we are having this COVID-19 pandemic. So how can we overcome our fear? We cannot touch a person. We have to maintain social distancing and so many other things. But still, many Jesuits are frightened to go out or still frightened of the COVID-19. So how do you overcome this fear?
Francis, you must have heard better. I'm getting old here.
Agil, I think it was not clear. You were not very clear.
Loud. I need
Loud,
to
yeah.
loud.
Come closer to the. Use the earphone.
Speak loud. Father, now can you hear me, Father?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, very good.
Father, you said that Francis Xavier overcame his fear by being with the people, by touching or kissing the wounds. So he overcame the fear. Now we are in the situation of this COVID-19 pandemic. Now we have to maintain social distancing. Many of us are frightened of this COVID-19. So how do we overcome our fear through the values of the founders like Saint Francis Xavier? We cannot touch or kiss any person. So how do we overcome?
Okay, very important question. It is not social distancing, but physical distancing. One of the ways is physical distancing is you wear your mask, keep yourself clean, your hands, and see to that, you don't cough at other person, And today, this is the new normal has become. So how can we overcome fear? Fear begets fear. Fear begets fear. That means the more fear you have, the more fear we got. So Jesus says in Luke's gospel, when the disciples on the little boat, they were almost at the verge of saying, "Why are you afraid? Why are you afraid, man? You have committed yourselves to the society of Jesus, when you took the final vows. You don't have wife or children or girlfriend. I don't know some of you. You're not supposed to. Okay. Why are you afraid? To tell you frankly, I am having the lowest immune system because of my health crisis and other things. I am not at all bothered about, death or getting contained and contagious. But prudence is very important. We have to be careful so that, we don't catch up unnecessarily and fall on someone and cough at someone. We have to take the steps. But there is no problem. Fear is in your head or heart, maybe. Take out that fear. Say that nothing. In Jesus' name, everything will be all right. Read the God, what you call the second chapter of Acts of the Apostles on the Pentecost comes about, and they were full of energy, full of ready to overcome everything. So that is the beauty of these things, So that's what we have to think about.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father.
Yeah. Welcome. Any question from Dharwad? Hassan? I think Sanson has some question. Sanson has a question?
Father, you spoke about the leadership. Ignatius was a good leader. And you also said there were some conflicts between the companions. Were they having a leader among them, or were everybody obeying a leader? And what is the quality of their companionship? Or did they have somebody to guide them or somebody to make decisions among them?
Yes, of course. See, this is the question. Ignatius comes to Paris as a senior man, senior citizen, can say. When he started, he was already 37 years old. And you see, already there are guys who have finished a master's studies. They were already educated, and even Francis Xavier was teaching, taking tuitions, Peter about. And here he comes, a person, people who are in universities, what happens even in our society sometimes, people are a little more studied well and were articulate. In front of them, others feel a bit of, I'm not good for nothing fellow. Self-image is always low self-image. Whereas those who have got well-educated people, they think that who is this villager has come? Even though he was a nobleman, he had not much Latin. He would make mistakes. He would not. They tried to push him to study, and he's not learning at all. Always the idea was this poor fellow. So one thing that yet they had come over. That's what we can see. The second was the rivals between the families, Xavier and Ignatius. And also, Peter Faber came from a very simple farming family. He was, what he was doing at the age of 11? He was a Golla, it means Gopala. It was grazing the cows. So you will see the differences in their noble status and other things. There were differences. It is certainly true. But they came over to the spiritual exercises. Once Francis Xavier and others come to know about these experiences of Ignatius through the spiritual exercises, they become closer. There is a reference to Jerome Nadal. Have you heard about Jerome Nadal, who went on explaining the Constitutional Society? He was a very important figure in the early society. He knew Ignatius and others already in 1534. You know what he used to say to them? He used to say that, what is this novelties you are forming? You are the people, instead of your exercises, I'm happy with the gospel. There are many people also say even today, why do you need your spiritual exercise? Why are propagating spiritual exercises? Promote gospel. And the same Geronimo Nadal, when he listens to the letter that Francis Xavier wrote in 1545 about his work in India, that letter, it says that if I would run to the corridors of the Sorbonne University, other universities, like a madman, saying that you are wasting your time. There are so many people who are going to hell because of your unreadiness to go there. That letter triggered a great interest in him, and he sets out and goes to Rome. This is the idea of what is this new group? And even among themselves came from different temperaments. I said different nationalities and countries were fighting among themselves. And there was a difficulty they had. And in spite of that, they came together with interest. Simon Bobadilla was not even happy with the others. Diagolinus, leave alone with Ignatius. Diagolinus, he was not happy with the Borgia also. Only Mercurian and this Rudolf Papiva seems to have taken him, because all the first companions died, and they became closer, and his enmity became less and less towards his senior years. That is the interesting thing. So that is what happens even among us. But we should have always greater good. That is very important.
Any more questions? Any question from Dharwad? Arun Raj is looking at others. Okay, if you do not have questions, maybe we can close for the day. I request Rudolf to propose the vote of thanks.
So good evening, Father. Can you hear? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Good evening, Father PCF, Father Olvin, and my dear friends. I would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to Father Olvin for accepting this invitation and filling our hearts and minds with the spirit of our founding fathers. Specifically, I would like to focus on a few points. You made it very clear of the relevance of the study of society in our history of our society, and you also told us not to be ignorant of it. You made us aware of the charisma of Ignatius, which, despite the differences among our first fathers, was able to hold them together. So thank you, dear Father, for enlightening on these aspects, and thank you very much for this quality time you have spent with us. I also thank our dear Father PCF for arranging this webinar, which deepened our knowledge of our society. Thank you, Father. I also thank the superiors of the Scholastics for making this webinar possible and helping us to participate as a whole community. And finally, this webinar wouldn't have been possible without you all, my dear friends. For instance, when Sanson was not there, Father PCF made it sure that Sanson would come and participate. In case he wouldn't have participated, Father would have cancelled and you would have postponed it. This tells us that each one of us is very important in our society, and the society counts on us because it is we who are going to create the future out of the history of the society. So thank you, dear friends, and thank you, dear fathers. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Rudolph. You have anticipated a vote of thanks for all the 4 sessions that we are going to have. So next we need not have. Once again, thank you, Father Olvin, for the beautiful exposition, and all others who helped Darward Scholastics for singing that prayer song. We heard only the beginning and at the end, but in between we were not able to hear, but doesn't matter. We prayed that time. And also Maria Devij for the beautiful introduction to Father Olvin. I think he summarized beautifully all that Father Olvin is, but much more than that. And also the others. Thanks to Rudolph for his vote of thanks.